talk about Isaiah and its uniqueness. We do this every week, and I give you some different things. We know that Isaiah is the Bible within the Bible. It has 66 chapters, just like there's 66 books in the Bible. There's 39 chapters that Isaiah has that has an Old Testament flavor to it, and then it has 27 chapters that has a New Testament flavor to it. So it really, people call it the Bible within the Bible. Isaiah was called the Messianic prophet. That's a powerful title right there, don't you think? The Messianic prophet. He's the one that tells us all about Jesus. The third thing, many consider him to be the Paul of the Old Testament. He is an intelligent man. He has different writing styles. He is so deep in theology, the things of God, and so rich in prophecy and all the rest. So many scholars consider him the Paul of the Old Testament. And the last one is the book of Isaiah has been called the Gospel according to Isaiah. If you start out in chapter 1, you remember where it talks about, though my sins be as scarlet, he will wash them whiter than snow. And last chapter 7, we know that he talked about that there is one that's going to be born unto a virgin. Amazing gospel insights 700 years before Jesus is born. And so I love this, that the book of Isaiah has been called the Gospel according to Isaiah. We're going to pick it up here tonight, and I'm going to make comments all the way through. We're going to stop and share some different things, but I'm going to have as much fun with some of these names that I could ever have, all right? We're going to look at the first 4 verses of Isaiah chapter 8. The Lord said to me, take a large scroll, write on it with an ordinary pen. Meha, Shalah, Has, Bas. So I called in Uriah, the priest of Zechariah, son of Jebekiah, as reliable witness for me. Then, I love the Bible, it just puts all the details in here. Then I made love to the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said to me, name him Mahar Shaha Haja Ba. For before the boy knows how to say my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the plunder of Samaria will be carried off by the king of Assyria. All right. Wow. Very interesting first 4 verses here. But you know what? One of the things I really love about what the Bible does, it humanizes the prophet Isaiah. He's a married man. He has 2 sons. We were actually introduced to his first son in chapter 7, verse 3. Now, prophecies that dealt with his son, his first son's name is Shear Joshua, means a remnant shall return. A remnant. And this actually was taking place all along. All the godly people that still trusted God that were in the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom was the 10 tribes that kind of wanted to go worship idols and all the rest. There was a remnant that left that and came down to Judea and Jerusalem. And this was the prophecy of Isaiah's first son. And then his second son, amazingly, God gives him, this is why he says, he called in Uriah, the priest of Zechariah's son, and said, hey, be a witness to this. My wife's not pregnant. God gave me this pen, and I got this scroll. I'm writing down this name, that this kid will be probably a college graduate before he can even spell his name. And God gave me this name. Now, the meaning of his name, Maha Shalah Baza Hasbaz, means swift to booty and speedily to the prey. I looked that up, saying there's got to be another meaning somewhere. There's got to really be. You got to get into what the 2 names together and the message that's going on. What's basically saying is God is going to plunder the northern kingdom, And that's what he tells us in verse 4, that before this boy that's just been named can say mom and dad, here's what Isaiah's burden that he has in his prophetic word. These two names were named with a message that were a constant reminder to him. His sons were a part of his prophecy. Isn't that amazing? You talk about someone that really takes the role of a prophet. Today we have men and women that call themselves prophets or prophetess, and God might give them something here and there. This man, his whole life was evolved around hearing from God for the future and for the judgment of, when I say Israel, that covers the north and the south. If I say the house of Israel, that's how they refer to the northern part of the kingdom. The southern part of the kingdom, they refer to it as Judah and Jerusalem. But when I say Israel, it covers all of them. And really, he gets prophecies for all of them, for the future of the messianic coming of Jesus. He gets prophecy about our future. Whew. And he gets insight and wisdom of how we have a personal relationship with God. So the destruction and the exile were coming, yet a remnant would return and be preserved. And we'll see this in chapter 8 here. I love this about Jesus. He does this today, and in the Old Testament, he's called Emmanuel. He'll be called Emmanuel in this chapter again here. So yes, you can find Jesus in the Old Testament all over the place. And it's not about just judgment. It's about bringing people back to God, okay? The judgment is to get their attention. Do you think that sounds like a country that you know of today, that judgment is getting people's attention? Yeah. Well, we pick up this 8th chapter in verse 5 now, and the Lord spoke to me again, because the people has rejected the gentle flowing waters of the Shiloh and rejoiced over Rezin and the son of Remaliah. Therefore the Lord is about to bring against them the mighty floodwaters of the Euphrates, the king of Assyria with all his pomp. It will overflow all its channels, run over all its banks, and sweep on into where? Oh, Judah. Judah's the south. So it's going to sweep over Judah, swirling over it, passing through it, and reaching up to the neck. Its outspread wings will cover the breadth of your land, Emmanuel. Ooh. After all this, here's the name. God is with us. So he's saying, if God doesn't bring judgment, is there a God? If evil always reigns? Important question there. We're not done with these verses yet. We're going to go to verse 12. So watch what he goes to say. Raise the war cry, you nations, and be shattered. Listen, all you distant lands. Prepare for battle and be shattered. Prepare for the battle and be shattered. Devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it will not stand. For God is with us. This is what the Lord said to me with his strong hand upon me, warning me not to follow the ways of this people. Now, God is with Isaiah, and God is with Jerusalem. Judah, the part of the south, is going to have a real trouncing, just like the north will in time here. But here's a very powerful verse here in verse 12, and this is one we're going to park here for a little bit and start a concept and a journey that God brings across to Isaiah that is so relevant for us here today. Do not call conspiracy everything this people calls a conspiracy. Do not fear what they fear, and do not dread it. All right. We've just been introduced to something here that, first off, he's saying when people are worshiping idols and they're messed up and all the rest, don't listen to what they're saying, this is a conspiracy or this is truth. Don't dread what they dread. And he gives them one key thing. Don't fear what they fear. Very, very important. If you notice your notes, I picked this to be the subject of the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is, according to Jeremiah and the Proverbs, it's the beginning of wisdom. the fear of the Lord. It's a very important aspect for us in our country today. We have something that's been going on in our country for a long time. We've moved God down to one characteristic, that he's a God of love. And people have quit understanding how to have an awe, a reverence, or this phrase, the fear of the Lord. So we look at this because it comes up several more times in this chapter. We're going to start our journey on this, the fear of the Lord. And in Revelation 11:18, you kind of see a connection. Revelation 11:18 is a future judgment. But listen to what it says. And the nations were enraged. Your wrath came, and the time came for the dead to be judged, and the time to reward your bondservants, the prophets, Isaiah, okay, and the saints, and those who fear your name, the small and the great, and to destroy those who destroy the earth. Whew. A lot happening out there in Revelation. It sounds like everything we just read in Isaiah, doesn't it? Because God is the same. Okay. And if you couldn't hear that on the internet, that was yesterday, today, and forever. So we see God as consistent with mankind. He's not doing something with one generation that he's not willing to do with another. And he always brings hope. He always brings redemption. He always gives a people a way out. Very, very, very powerful in this. All right, let's look at two more verses, 13 and 14, and watch how this fear of the Lord comes up again. The Lord Almighty is the one you are to regard as holy. He is the one you are to fear. He is the one you are to dread. He will be a holy place for both Israel. Now, when he's saying it this time, he's talking about the northern part, for both Israel and Judea, the southern part. And he will be a stone that causes people to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. And for the people of Jerusalem, he will be a trap and a snare. Wow, did that sound like something that somebody else was saying in the future? If you go to 1 Peter chapter 3, I think it is, around 18, it's not going to be on your screen. Peter talks about that he's the one that makes people stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. He is the cornerstone. Yes, an uneducated Peter falls in love with the prophet Isaiah also and quotes this portion of it here. And who's the rock that makes people stumble? This is the Old Testament, what Peter's saying who he is in the New Testament. It's Jesus, isn't it? But we see the foundation laid again of he is the one who? Who's he? Emmanuel. He named him up here earlier. God with us. He's the one you're to fear. And wow, he's the one you are to dread. Now, I think that's said for two different people there. You fear him if you have a relationship with him. A holy reverence fear is what it's talking about. You dread him if you don't have a relationship with him. Okay? If you notice, he separates that there, and so he's talking to all mankind. If you have a right relationship, in a righteous relationship with God, you still fear him. If you don't have a right relationship or in righteousness with him, then you're going to dread what's coming, because God's judgment is coming. So we look at the fear of the Lord again one more time, and now I want to keep, last time I took you to the future all the way to Revelation, I want to take you just out to Malachi. In Malachi chapter 3, verses 16 and 17, it says this, and then those who fear the Lord spoke to one another, and the Lord gave attention and heard it. And a book of remembrance was written before him for those who fear the Lord and who esteemed his name. They will be mine, says the Lord of hosts. On that day I prepare my own possessions. I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. That sounds like the promises right before the rapture too, doesn't it? God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So we see that in the process of the judgment of the northern kingdom of Israel and Judah, that God is doing a teaching here to Isaiah for the people to hear and for him to declare to them this subject of the fear of the Lord. Now, I want to look at two more verses, and then we're going to really delve into this fear of the Lord. Verse 15, many of them will stumble, they will fall and be broken, they will be snared and captured. Now watch this instruction here. Bind up this testimony of warning. I'm sorry, this actually came before the Malachi verse here that I gave you. Bind up this testimony of warning and seal up God's instruction among my disciples. Now, very interesting. When you hear something being bound up, a testimony, it's telling you that it not only has an application for that day and time, but there's going to be a future application for this. That the things that you're learning about the fear of the Lord and the things of how God deals in judgment, he says, bind this up and these instructions and this warning and seal it up among my disciples. Now, let's skip. Am I there? Okay. I'm not there yet. I got to get to 17. I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my trust in him. Oh, okay. Now, this is a very important part. When we talk about the fear of the Lord, it's not a fear that I don't want to trust him because I fear him. It's a fear of reverence and awe that I trust him so much, I'm fearful not to trust him. If he says to do something, it may not make sense to my mind. It may not make sense in my culture, but God tells me to do this. I will fear him enough that I will trust him. And I picked two scriptures. As a matter of fact, on the subject of the fear of the Lord, there's 32 different scriptures of instruction about the fear of the Lord. I only picked a few. I picked the one from Revelation, one from Malachi, and then I picked one from Psalms and Proverbs for you here. The first one in Psalms 115:11, remember, if you fear him, you will trust him. This is the connection. The fear of the Lord is also a trust. I fear him enough that I will trust him even when it doesn't make sense to me because God knows everything. All right? Here's what the psalmist David said. You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. Connection, huh? You who fear the Lord, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Okay? If you fear the Lord, you have to trust him because he is your help. He is your protector. He is your shield. And then Proverbs, I wanted that one in there because of the wisdom aspect of it again. The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil. Whew. Now, I don't know about you. In the natural, if you fear something, you're not sleeping at night. So you can see this fear is a different fear in a relationship with our God. It's not a fear where you're worried at night, what will God do? It's a peace so much that you have this fear of the Lord, but an understanding that you trust him. He's sovereign. He's all-powerful. What he says he's going to do, he's going to do. It says that you may sleep satisfied. Now, this is so important because when we haven't taught on this enough within the Christian community and how to be a disciple and fear God as you serve him. As you put all these ingredients, and I gave you some major ones here, the major ingredients of fearing the Lord is that you trust him, you believe that he has his best interest for you, he's working on your behalf, and that you can sleep at peace at night over this. Now, let me spell out, let's move it into 2016. What's wrong with Christianity today? What's wrong with our world today? We've lost the fear of the Lord. All right, so here we go. I'm going to give you 4 things in this, and it's there in your notes. There are 4 things for the fear of the Lord. If we do what the 2016 world is doing, they say love is the only characteristic people are willing to accept about God today. When you make God a single, that his love has to override everything. So in other words, love wins all the time and all the rest. Number two comes into play. If you have a God, and if you have a God that is just love, you don't have the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's not just a God of love. Number two comes into play, and we see this in our world. Love without restraint creates lawlessness. The future name of the Antichrist, the lawless one. That kind of tells me something here. Because Christianity has been bombarded, because of love you have to accept gay marriage. Because of love you have to accept that whatever sin people do. Well, no, we don't have to accept their sin. We pray that they will learn to accept God and be changed from their sins. We love them like God loves them, but we don't want them to continue in their sin because their sin's going to bring them to eternal death. And so if love is our only thing that we can dispense from a church, we become the lawless ones. The fear of the Lord has to go hand in hand. And I'm convinced that the Antichrist will be a super promoter of love wins. Just as we saw when the Supreme Court changed what the Bible has taught for over 5,000 years, that marriage is between a man and a woman, that our president put the gay rainbow on the White House and put out love won. No. Love got its brains beat out that day. Because it's God's love, not a human love that says everything is acceptable and there's no restraint. That's lawlessness. But I do believe that will be the characteristic of the Antichrist. He will spell that out. Now watch this though. Why did we get away from the fear of the Lord? Because something happened in the 60s and the 70s. The fear of the Lord without love creates legalism. That's point number 3. The fear of the Lord without love creates legalism. Now, some of you is looking at this age group here, some of you are too young to remember what church was like in the 60s and 70s. Just go, that's me, I can't, either I'm too young or I can't remember that far back, one or the other, right? That the church became a very legalistic place. We looked at all the sins as if we graded one sin worse than another. And in some ways, we could do that even with homosexuality. It's no different than any other sin. Except for this, it wants to be legitimized as a normal way of life and not a sin. That's why it stands so much apart. We still say today, murder is a sin. Stealing is a sin. When you don't have those things, anarchy comes into play. It kind of sounds like that's what we have in our streets sometimes, where they're allowed to rob stores and turn over police cars and burn things if they feel like they've been unjustly loved or haven't been treated in a fair way. Now, I can't solve all the social issues here, but I can tell you this. Our legalism created some of this. We as leaders, our older ones, we were guilty of becoming legalistic. And we named one sin greater than the other. We just need to make it very clear that if you're a homosexual, you're living in sin. But if you're a gossip, you're living in sin also. And that sin's going to send you to hell, gossip, just as much as choosing to live a lifestyle of homosexuality. What we did was we white-collared some sins and said, yeah, that everybody does that. Well, now guess what? Everybody has a choice to a man to marry a man and a woman to marry a woman. So just as we legitimized gossip, I was only sharing it as a prayer request. And I'm sure those 39 people I shared it with are all praying. Okay? What we did was we legitimized our own sins, and because of legalism, we didn't want to be legalistic, and so therefore we had to adopt everybody's sins as okay. Now, point number 4, it takes both love and the fear of the Lord to have a healthy relationship with God. It takes both. And I really think that's where he's going here with verse 17 that goes on to verse 18. Verse 17 back again, it won't be on the screen. I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the descendants of Jacob. I will put my trust in him. Even though he's hiding his face at this moment, it seems like, where is he, God? Jacob, this is the southern part. They didn't go and worship idols, but yes, they have sinned also. Now, verse 18, Isaiah brings it back very personal here for this one verse right here, and then it moves into some dark things turning to light. So think all of a sudden in the middle, Isaiah has been thinking on this. I trust God. I fear him. Even when I can't see him, he's hiding his face from, I still trust him. Here am I, and the children of the Lord has given me. We are signs. Remember, he named both his kids signs about the destruction and the exile and the plunder of what? Northern kingdom and Judah. We are signs and symbols in Israel from the Lord Almighty who dwells on Mount Zion. So he's kind of just pulling it all together and saying, God, my life is this. Isaiah was a real human being, married to a real woman that had 2 real kids that were part of the prophecies of what was all going on. And he goes, my whole life, my whole ministry, my whole marriage, my children, we're all signs of what's going on in this day and age. He just pauses for a moment. Let that sink in. Sometimes we make these prophets like they're just great men of God and they're not human. I think he's feeling the weight of all the things that are coming down that have already started in the northern kingdom and now are coming to Judah. We pick it up then, and we're going to look at verses 18 through, I just read 19 through 24, the end of the chapter here. When someone tells you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, God really gets down to it. It's not just the evil ones that we go, but that's why I picked on gossip in there. The whisperers and the mutterers. In the New Testament, we call them gossips, okay? Should not a people inquire of God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Wow. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged and looking upward will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Now, this last portion of it, because he said just in verse 17, tie up this instruction. I believe in this last part, I put it in your notes and I put it all right there. I believe there's a double meaning to this prophecy. The meaning was coming for that day and that time. The Assyrians are going to take over everything but Jerusalem. Because if you got to go back to chapter 7, God gave a protection and said, hey, trust me, no matter what they bring out, Jerusalem's not going to fall. Jerusalem won't fall for another 100 years when the Babylonians come. Okay? Judah, though, the whole southern region and the whole northern region is going to fall. All this is going to be fulfilled. But the double meaning of tie this up and bind this instruction. I believe if you read that, as you're reading that, couldn't you visualize 2016? And so the double meaning is all these prophecies came to pass in Isaiah's day. They also point to the end of days. And it led me to two scriptures, and these scriptures are as several of the others. If you're wondering what translation, I didn't mark all the scriptures of what translation I was using, but a lot of these were the English Standard Version translation, if you're wondering where I was reading from. Listen to this first one here in Revelation 18:23. As we just read what we read here, the distress, the hunger, it's interesting. As things get bad, who do they blame? They blame the king. Let's put president or whoever in that, and they blame God. And then they look to see what they can do, and all they see is distress in the world. Revelation 18:23, yeah, there you go. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the light of the lamp, remember I had said in here about the darkness? Wow. And they have no light of the dawn. And the light of the lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride will be heard in you no more. Did you catch what that just said? Not only the voice of Jesus, the bridegroom, but the voice of the bride. That's us, the church. We have a voice in this culture. We're the light, we're the salt, we're the voice, along with the bridegroom. Will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. Wow. Very interestingly, because sorcery, remember what it said up here? They consulted mediums and spirits. Sorcery can also mean pharmaceuticals here. The source of you were deceived by all your drugs. You were deceived by that the world had an answer by something that you could take, something you could receive, or it points right exactly to the evil of what Isaiah's translation is, that you consulted the mediums and the spirits. Now, let's go to Revelation 21:8 and watch how it also ties in with the same thoughts here. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral. That throws in the heterosexuals in there too, doesn't it? Sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Isaiah has this blessing, and yet it seems like a weight. And I think that's why he gave that verse 18. My kids and my family were all a sign of all this. And this is coming right here. But it's also the weight of a future. And it's our future. And we see all these things tied in together for today. As we see these things, remember this. It's the outspread wings that will cover your breath of your land. Emmanuel. There's a God that's still over. The outspread wings, the beginning part of that verse, chapter, is talking about a God that's still sovereign. He's still over it all. But he paints a very, very real message of what came that they've already lived through. We're talking almost 2,700 years ago, all that was fulfilled. And yet, it's a part of our future. We need, as a church, to start becoming the healthiest place a human being can be, where we preach the love of God, that no matter what your sin is, no matter what the list is, a liar is just as bad as a sexually immoral. No matter what your list of sin is, God can forgive you. And we want you to learn and fall in love with the love of God, but we want you also to pick up the fear of the Lord. And I saw that intertwined in this chapter 8, that a God that is willing to still be God over them, even though they've rejected him. He said, judgment's going to come, but my wings will be over Emmanuel. God will be with us. He turned to him. But it's from that verse of my wings, Emmanuel will be, God will be with you, that he goes through the fear of the Lord. It's time for us to teach again our kids, our grandkids. I sent this portion of this teaching out to all 3 of my children. And I said to them, I will never question your love for God, but I have some doubts about your fear of the Lord. I believe that you've gotten easy on some things that because you're young in this culture and that you are accepting things that God would not want to be a part of your life because you've lost the fear of the Lord. And I gave them the scriptures that I gave you tonight. I believe these scriptures and the things that you have tonight, it's time to have the talk again. And most of them will say, I'm cool, I love God. And we go, I understand that. But just to love God can still give you a pass to lawlessness if it's just love. We need the fear of the Lord to be the balance to the love of God. I challenge you, for many of you are parents and grandparents and moms and dads, aunts and uncles, you got friends and all the rest. I've been trying to share this message and how interesting that Isaiah 8 right here with all the different things, it just comes in this part of it. I've been trying to share this message with as many friends, as many pastors, and as many family members as I can. It's time to understand God is coming soon. He's sending his son. And judgment is coming. If you don't learn to fear the Lord now, you might have to learn the fear of the Lord in a very tough time period called the tribulation. I'd much rather confront them with the fear of the Lord in the here and now than in a time when they're dealing like Isaiah was dealing with the northern kingdom and with Judah. God was bringing judgment when they had to learn the fear of the Lord. I pray, I don't know how short the window is to when we move to God's wrath and judgment, but this is the day for us as a church to share the message again, the love of God and the balance of the fear of the Lord. That you can what? You can trust him. You can sleep at night. He will be your friend in these things. But you will know that there are boundaries that you cannot break. I hope I made it as clear as possible for you tonight. I want to pray for you and for your families. Who knows how long we have before that trumpet blast happens and we are moved from this earth and wrath and judgment starts here, and some of our children and our children's children may not be ready, and they'll have to learn this lesson in a much tougher season of life. Father, I've done the best to share your word tonight. I pray that the truth of this word, Isaiah lived through a great tribulation in his own time. And your word says there's one in the future for mankind once again. Give us the ability to talk with an honesty, a brokenness, and yet an openness that we want our children to know the truth. Lord, if anything, they could point them to this message where they could hear the truth. And I pray right now and declare the truth will set our children and our children's children free. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. All right. Okay. Well,